Hi again. This is our brief lecture number 2 on chapter 3, and in this lecture I'm going to focus more on social responsibility and sustainability. In the brief lecture 1 we talked about ethics and ethical codes. We talked about different perspective on ethics and the role of culture, the influence on culture and ethics. In this brief lecture 2, we're going to focus more on social responsibility and sustainability. But before I get to the social responsibility part, I want to really look at sustainability. Sustainability has become a very, very hot topic in the last 20 to 25 years, especially in organizational politics and business. This idea or this concept of sustainability is about acting in ways that support high quality of life for present and future generations. What are we talking about here? Well, we see our actions today not from a short-term perspective, but from a long-term perspective, meaning that we not only use the inputs that we have today to be successful today, to make our lives as human beings that are living on this earth good and successful today, but doing it in a way that protects and preserves the resources and the information and all the other inputs that we use so that they will be available for our future generation. So it's acting today with a mind towards the future. And so you hear things about alternative energy and recycling, waste avoidance. They have more to do with the natural environment concept of sustainability, and that's good. But you must also concern yourself with human development, with poverty, with gender equality, with social rights. All of these things are about, again, working today, doing what's best for our humankind today, but also doing it in such a way that it helps to ensure that we and our future generations can survive and can flourish in the future. So this concept of sustainability, as you will see, is heavily tied to this other concept of social responsibility and governance. Well, social responsibility is very much like business ethics, but it's a little bit different. Essentially what it is applying ethical and moral perspectives to organizations rather than to the individual people in the organizations. Now, that's a little bit of a confusing, if you will, definition, because while we're suggesting that it is an organizational approach, we must be mindful that it's the individual in the organization, the individuals in the organizations, I should say, that actually act in socially responsible or irresponsible manners. But nevertheless, whereas in business ethics we focus more on individual decision making, in social responsibility we look at more collective or organizational decision making. So that's kind of the difference. It's very, very similar. People use the terms interchangeably, but there is some distinction. And it obligates, it says here, organizations to act in ways that serve both the interests of the organization, its own interest, and the interests of society. What do we see here? We see a balancing of two specific responsibilities. One is that we recognize as a for-profit business, organizations have responsibilities to their investors, to their shareholders. They've invested money. They have a fiduciary responsibility, the organizations that have those responsibilities, to protect and to promote the well-being of the shareholders. But as we argued before, this has to be done in such a way that it also creates a value for the general society. Because if we can promote the well-being of shareholders, but in doing so, we harm society today and definitely harm the sustainability of society for the future, then we are not necessarily creating real value for society. So social responsibility suggests that firms not only look at the bottom line financially, but also look at its impact in terms of the social value and the environmental and natural environmental value it is creating or is in fact diminishing. So that is the social responsibility initiative, if you will. This concept is related to this idea of stewardship. And in stewardship, you take responsibility, personal responsibility, to always and protect the respect, I should say, and protect the interests of society. In stewardship, you see the environment as both your supply basin as well as the entity in which you live in. Going back to the open systems approach to organizations, businesses do not operate in a vacuum. They are part of society. They extract resources from society and they put resources or they put outputs back into society. Therefore, as members of society, as therefore social and corporate citizens, they, just like other individuals in society, have a responsibility to take care of it. And so instead of just looking at the, as I said, the financial figures, just looking at that one aspect of performance, we see now a concern or a perspective that promotes a triple bottom line approach. Triple bottom line approach is that we look at the 3 P's of performance: profit, which is the traditional conventional measure; people, which is our humankind, our human capital, social capital; and of course the planet, the natural environment. So we not only take decisions to promote our financial well-being, but when we take decisions as an organization, we must concern ourselves with the people and the planet. Okay? So many popular companies that you know of have utilized this triple bottom concept to some degree. Okay? Johnson and Johnson, Novo Nordisk, other companies have really looked at just not making money, but doing it in a socially responsible manner. This also is related, social responsibility and stewardship is also related to this idea of stakeholder management. Stakeholder management basically embraces the ideal that organizations have a responsibility beyond just to their shareholders. They have a responsibility to other groups. Well, these other groups, these other entities, these other individuals are called stakeholders. And who is a stakeholder? Well, it's any organization or group or individual persons that directly affect the behavior of the organization and are affected by the behavior of the organization, and therefore they hold a stake in the organization's performance. Okay, so you don't necessarily have to be a shareholder. You don't have to have invested financial resources into an organization in order for you to have a stake. You may not be a shareholder, but you will be a stakeholder. So groups like consumers, correct, employees, governments, communities, they all are stakeholders, don't necessarily have any financial interest in the firm, but because they are affected by the firm's behavior and the firm is affected by their behavior, they are seen as being stakeholders. Well, not all stakeholders are seen as being equal by organizations. Some are seen as being more important, and it's because they have what's called stakeholder power. The capacity of a stakeholder to positively or negatively affect the operations of the organization. So let's say, for example, you were a shopper, a very frequent shopper to Walmart. Okay, and you realized that by going into Walmart, that Walmart was not taking care of your community. Walmart was, throwing their trash away in such a way that it was kind of harming the community that you lived in. They were not, when they were building, expanding, they were taking resources away from the community, and they would deforest, cutting down trees, and you had a serious problem with that. And so you wrote to Walmart, or you spoke to the regional manager, and you probably won't see anything done. And the reason why is because as an individual, you really don't have that much power. But what if you were to start mobilizing? You were to start getting some of your family members, some people in your neighborhood, and then the news picked up on that, and then an environmental group kind of came and joined you, and then you got widespread support. You might have gone on Facebook or blog. Then you become more, and as you increase your power, you increase your number, your power perhaps has become increased. And that gives you then legitimacy, and it also makes your concern a little more urgent to Walmart. So those are the things that make stakeholders powerful with respect to changing the behavior of organizations. So stakeholders, groups that are affected and affect the organizations, and include shareholders, but it goes beyond that. As I said, communities, governments, employees, suppliers, right? Any one of these entities that interacts, if you will, with the firm. This is just a good illustration. Again, you're talking about all these players here being part of the stakeholder community or the stakeholder network in which the organization finds itself. Well, just like ethics, just like when we discuss with ethics, there are different perspectives on social responsibility. The classical perspective is the one most akin to conventional business wisdom and the financial part of the bottom line. It is that the management's only responsibility is to maximize profits. This is an opinion that was most popularly voiced by an economist called Milton Friedman. And Milton Friedman argued that firms had no business trying to make society better, trying to improve community, trying to expand upon the social good, not because he thought that was such a bad thing, but because he believed businesses were not the best entity to do that. That was better left to governments and other organizations like churches and charitable foundations because they were better equipped to handle the social responsibility. And he said businesses therefore should be left to do what businesses are good at, and that is to make a profit. That's the classical view. The problem with that classical view is that it does not necessarily assume that businesses, because they are parts of societies, they are a part of society, have a social responsibility just like any other individual. And so if they just focus on maximizing shareholder wealth, they might do it and sacrifice the well-being and sustainability of society. So therefore, they must be conscious of what they do while they are doing it. The other extreme of the classical view is the socioeconomic view, which says, okay, managers must be concerned with the broader social welfare, not just profit. This is more of a moralistic, altruistic argument. It suggests that you must do good for society because you have a moral and social right to do so. Well, that's great, and it of course accounts for the problems that arise in the classical view where there is no consideration for society. Here there is great consideration for society, but it might be such that firms in pursuing the social good actually endanger their profitability, which then puts them in a problematic situation relative to their shareholders. What do I mean by that? In the classical view, you might have the problem where the business is so focused on making a profit, it does that by endangering the well-being of general society. It pollutes. Okay, it might treat its workers unfairly, and while it is being profitable in the short term, in the long term, it's hurting society. That's a problem. In the socioeconomic view, the organization might take the perspective that it should promote the social agenda. It should create this drug and give it to as many people as it can, so to cure this disease and help, of course, the health of the world. But in doing so, it ignores the fact that that drug cost a lot of money, which was financed by its shareholders. And they financed it because they believed that they would get a financial return by doing so. And so if you take their money and don't necessarily maximize it, as you said you would, that's a problem. So both of these perspectives have, again, advantages, have good points, but they also have drawbacks. If you want, this third perspective is somewhat of a compromise. And the compromise comes from the fact that it says, yes, businesses should worry and concern themselves with maximizing shareholder wealth. They should be in business for profit. That's good. But doing so, they must also be concerned for the well-being of society. And therefore, those two perspectives are not necessarily at the opposite ends of the spectrum. In fact, the firm can do both and do both successfully, meaning that the firm can, in fact, create profit and do it in a socially responsible way. And in fact, by being more socially responsible, the firm can, in fact, increase its profitability. So what does it say here? The firm approaches business decisions with the understanding that the economic and social progress are interconnected, meaning that I cannot be profitable in the long run if I don't take care of society. Well, that makes just sense, doesn't it? Because as we go, going back again to your open systems approach, if as an organization I am getting my inputs from society and I am selling my outputs to society, if I don't take care of society, there will be no society to get my inputs from and no society to sell my outputs to. So it's in my best interest to take care of the environment in which I operate. And therefore, I cannot see my financial obligation as being independent from my social obligation. They're connected. And there's this virtuous social responsibility cycle behavior and improves financial performance. So the more I said, as I said before, the more socially responsible I am, the more I contribute to society in strategic ways, the better my financial performance will be. And as my financial performance increases, I can contribute more to society, which will then increase my financial performance even more. So it is a virtuous cycle. Okay? Well, while that might sound great, there are arguments for and against social responsibility. Some of the strongest arguments against it says, well, one, it reduces profits. And that's sometimes true. It is costly to be environmentally conscious. Businesses have to change or re-engineer plants many times, right? They have to give up certain types of behavior, and that might cost money, higher business costs. Dilution of business purpose, meaning that when I was just focused on maximizing shareholder wealth, that is all I concentrated on, and I was probably doing it really well. When I started to think about the environment and communities and the social good, well, it took me away a little bit from maximizing my shareholder wealth, and so my purpose has somewhat become diluted. This question of too much social power, essentially what it is saying that here as a business, I am giving you this social responsibility to take care of the earth, to take care of environments, to take care of communities. And essentially that should probably be done by governments that are supposed to be the ones that are doing that are taking care of society. And if you give that power to businesses, you put too much power in their hands. Well, some of the arguments for or refuting those arguments against is that, yeah, in the short term, this might actually cost us money. It might actually hurt us initially to be socially responsible. But the more that we do this, as we saw from the virtuous cycle, the more that we invest in the long term, we're likely to see the benefits of it. It's kind of like, let's say you were trying to be healthy, and in the short term, being healthy means that if you go to a wedding, you go to a birthday party, and there's a cake there, you can't eat it. You really want to eat it, but you can't eat it. You're sacrificing. Well, the reason you're sacrificing, well, it doesn't feel good in the moment. It doesn't feel good to get up at 5 o'clock maybe and go do exercises. In the long run, 10 years, 12 years after, when you're a little bit older and you still feel good and maybe your friends don't, that's when you see the benefit. So in the short term, it hurts, but in the long term, you see the benefit. Of course, your public image is increased. Consumers love to be associated with companies that are doing good, and it increases your reputation. You don't have to worry too much about government regulation. You're not worried about them. You are fines and fees. Why? Because you're doing good voluntarily. And you have an obligation, I said, because you're a social actor. That's one of the major arguments for social responsibility. Because you're a social actor, because you're a part of society, you have, and because you have so much power. Many times businesses now, multinational businesses, transnational businesses, are larger than many governments. And so because you have that size, to whom much is given, much is expected. That is that power that it resides because of your size. These are some strategies or perspectives on social responsibility, and they kind of go into a hierarchy. This is built on a model, a pyramid that was created by a guy called Carroll. And essentially what you see here is the 4 different strategies. As you move up the vertical, this is when the firm becomes more socially responsible, At the very bottom, of the axis is the obstructionist strategy. And at that strategy is you simply doing your economic responsibility, you're maximizing your share. That's the classical view. But you are not doing any type of social obligations whatsoever. You don't want to hear about anything to try to contribute to society. I'm just doing what is best for my profitability. Okay? And I might even be doing this illegally. I might even be doing this in a manner that is endangering society and actually infringing upon the law. The defensive strategy is that, yeah, I am being economically responsible, I am meeting my financial obligation, but unlike the obstruction strategy, I am still fulfilling the law. So if they say to me, you cannot pollute to this level, then I'm going to follow this. The obstruction strategy might try to get around that. Defensive is that I'm just going to stay within the law. I'm only going to do what the law requires of me, nothing more. The accommodative strategy is that I do what's right financially, I do what's right for my shareholders, I do what's right legally, but I also see myself as having some ethical responsibilities. And these ethical responsibilities really come from social norms. Okay, so I recognize that legally I may not have to do this. Legally, I may not have to have a poverty campaign. The law doesn't require me to do that. But the society that I live in is kind of requiring me to do that. Society creates these norms, these ethical obligations, and said, you know what, yes, while that might not be legally problematic, as society, we think that you should be doing more than that. And that's where this ethical responsibility. So the accommodative strategy, the word accommodative there, it accounts for accommodating the will or the wishes of society. So I do my financial, I do my my legal, but I go beyond that. And the most socially responsible companies are the ones that practice this proactive strategy. Not only do they meet the economic, the legal, and the ethical, but they fulfill what's called this discretionary responsibility. Carol calls it this discretionary, proactive type responsibility that the firm does or acts in a way that shows leadership with respect to social initiatives. So nobody else is doing these things except this firm. Companies like Patagonia, companies like Timberland, companies that are known for their social responsibility initiatives are the ones that are practicing the proactive strategy. Yoplait, for example, with the lids. That's proactive. It goes beyond just meeting social, legal, and economic requirements, and leadership takes initiatives to be more socially responsible. So these four strategies here demonstrate, if you will, the evolution. Firms might begin as obstructionists, don't want anything to do with social responsibility, and then evolve perhaps into that proactive strategy where you are a leader in terms of social responsibility. Okay, that's it.